Greetings everyone, my name is Rejnols, and today we're doing a Custodes unit tier list. Now you might be saying that this is completely redundant, seeing as the Dataslate has already been out for like 1.5 months, actually more like 2 months, and we're about 2 months away from the next Dataslate coming sometimes in January. That being said, there's always people out there asking, what do you think about this unit? What do you think about that unit? And while I could make individual videos talking about each of them, I feel like we'll just do one big one and go through each of them a little bit quicker. And then if there's still people having questions about any one unit, I can do a dedicated video for it. So that's why we're doing a tier list today. Keep in mind that this is purely my opinion, and you are welcome to disagree. Before we get into the tier list, I would ask you to either like or subscribe this video. Well, not subscribe the video, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content and want to see more of it. Alright, let's get right into it. So, we have 5 categories to put our units into, starting at amazing, then going strong, average, flawed choice, and then finally, they look cool. Hopefully the tiers themselves explains why they are there, but I will give an example for each tier just at the start to get things started. So let's start at the top with amazing. I'm gonna go ahead and take Trajan Valorous. Now, a lot of people are saying that Trajan Valorous is too expensive at 160 points, and that they would rather have a shield captain or a blade champion. Now, the blade champion I think is a fair thing to say they want instead, but they kinda serve different roles. The blade champion is your missile, right? You wanna advance in charge and get him and his unit in the face of your opponent, and then hopefully things go well. Trajan is a bit more of an anvil, but at the same time, he's also a hammer. Whereas the Blade Champion is mostly a hammer, or even, a missile, as I was saying before. Yes, Trajan is 160 points, but he comes with ignore modifiers, which, to be fair, depending on where you play and what rule set you adopt, either means that he has one of the best abilities in the game, or one of the worst abilities in the game. If you're playing with WTC rules, and rules as written, then ignore modifiers is amazing. It lets you ignore Armor of Contempt, -1 damage, half damage. Anything that would modify any of your characteristics, ignore it. Now, I know someone in the comments is gonna be like, well, GW actually just uploaded an FAQ. Well, no, that's not an FAQ. That was a rule set for a certain tournament. Just the same way as a tournament organizer for any tournament that you play in can go ahead and make calls on certain rules and say, these are the rules we play with for this tournament. That is the same case for the GW rules, okay? You might say, well, GW wrote them and it's for the GW World Championship, so it must be official, right? No, because it was the events team that made those rules, not the rules team, and as we probably know by now, it does seem like GW have absolutely horrible communication between different departments when it comes to design, rules, and clarification. So I would not take those rules as official until they're actually official. Rand over. Right, Trajan, ignoring modifiers, super strong, very powerful, means that he can do a lot of things that a lot of other Custodians units just cannot accomplish. Fighting a Redemptor Dreadnought with Armor of Contempt and the -1 damage actually becomes doable with Trajan squad, whereas with another squad, it's just not happening. His Fight First ability, allowing him to fight first no matter where he is, once per game. This is very strong in certain matchups, say World Eaters and Chaos Space Marines. Now, for the Chaos Space Marines part, you're still gonna get your ass kicked most likely, because Chaos Space Marines are wild right now, but it does allow you to take Trajan's unit, deploy them on the line of your deployment zone, and if your opponent decides to charge you, well, you can pop Fight First and probably kick their asses. Because once again, you ignore that Armor of Contempt they can potentially pop, and now the entire squad is saving on 5s. And say 5 Wardens or 5 Guardians with Trajan will probably take down a 5-man chosen unit, probably not kill a 10-man unit, but do a lot of damage to it. In the World Eater matchup, I think he kind of wins the matchup for us, because you deploy on the line with the Trajan squad, you say, alright, come and charge me. And they do, and then you punch them first, and they die. If they don't come and charge you, well, Trajan starts walking up the board and be like, oh boy, here I go killing again. And at any one point, if they finally decide, alright, now I'm charging Trajan, you pop that Fight First, you punch first. One of my favorite things to do with Trajan is actually not use his Fight First ability, but use his 12 attacks ability. But I still make sure to get Fight First by spending 2 command points and being in range of an objective marker, because Fight First with 12 attacks Trajan ignoring modifiers is nasty. So I've been convinced otherwise. Before I was like, yeah, Shield Captain versus Trajan, I would say the Shield Captain is probably better in more situations. But overall, I've been convinced Trajan is still our strongest character unit. in a vacuum, right? Because if you do a build that's like, all right, here's 3 blade champions that just rush my opponent and I try and win by turn 2 or I lose by turn 3, then that's another completely different case. All right, that was the first one for the amazing tier, Trajan Valoris. Now we move into the strong tier. And in the strong tier, I would like to place the Venatari. They've seen a resurgence ever since the Dataslate because they became cheaper. They actually got to a price point where they are a good choice to take. And that's exactly why I put them where they are. I think they are a strong choice. I think they are hard to play correctly. Because while they do have lands, which is very nice, they don't have the rerolls of guards. They don't have the durability of wardens. But they do have a lot of speed, they rapid ingress, so you can do some things with these guys that you cannot do with those other units. But at the same time, you cannot just expect them to live or expect them to kill whatever they make contact with. So they are a bit tricky to play with. That being said, I still think they are a strong choice. Moving into the average choice, I'm gonna take the good old Land Raider. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong in taking a Land Raider, but I also think that you need to think why you bring it. You don't just bring it because it's good. I mean, you don't bring any one unit just because. You usually have a game plan of some sort, but for the Land Raider, it's like, okay, you have last cannons, you have heavy bolters, and you have 100 killer missile. If that's all you use the Land Raider for, it's not worth taking. Alright, so I need to transport something in it. What am I transporting? How am I positioning it on the board? Those things are more impactful than actually bringing the Land Raider, thinking about how you use the Land Raider, and that's why I put the Land Raider in average. I don't think it's wrong to take a Land Raider, but I also don't think it's automatically correct to bring one. Into flawed choice we go, and here we place the Achilles Contemptor Dreadnought. On paper, he looks good, right? Strength 12, d6 plus 2 damage, lands, some mortal wounds on impact, some mediocre shooting, but you get some flamers. You know, on paper, all of that looks good. But then comes the point that he moves 6 inches. He's only toughness 9. He has a 5-up invulnerable save. He does not have -1 damage or a 6-up feel no pain like he did in 9th edition. And it just becomes quite clear quite quickly that by the time he gets to a target that he wants to punch, he'll probably be dead. You cannot rapid ingress him because he doesn't have deep strike. Well, you can rapid ingress him, but it'd have to be from a battlefield edge. And if you come from a battlefield edge, chances are the opponent can shoot you. So that's not really an option either. And yeah, there's just not any good build I see using these guys. You could argue that you can make use of them if you bring enough of them and your opponent, you know, rolls badly or you're a little bit lucky with your 5-up invulnerable saves. But in general, it's a flawed choice. What he can do, other things can do better. And that's why he lands in this category. Finally, we have they look cool category. And for that one, I'm gonna go ahead and put the Palace Gravitack. The Palace Gravitack have absolutely no redeeming qualities in my mind. I actually had to look up the datasheet to make sure that I wasn't forgetting something, but no, it's actually just super bad. So it's 120 points. It moves 12 inches, which was nice. It's toughness 8, which is, you know, just a bad toughness stat to have in 9th or in 10th edition. It's a 2-up save, 5-up invulnerable, like most vehicles. It has 9 wounds, so it does have a decent amount of wounds. Leadership 6, OC 2. And then it has a gun, and that's it. The gun is the Twin Arachnus Blaze Cannon, 8 shots at 24-inch range, strength 5, AP 1, damage 1, devastating wounds, twin linked. And you might be like, oh my god, it has devastating wounds, I need 5 of them. Right, slow down. Alright, first of all, 24-inch range, that's very short. Next up, 8 attacks, hitting on 2s, that's 7 hits on average. We're fishing for 6s, right? Because we want those devastating wounds. So, fishing for 6s. The first 7 dice we roll, wound roll, we get 1 6 on average. Alright, we re-roll all the remaining dice. That's 6 dice. That's another 6 on average. That's 2 devastating wounds. Let's say that you are shooting into something that is below half strength, so you get that +1 to wound, and you're wounding them on 4s. Then you're looking at 3 normal saves at AP 1, damage 1, which basically means it's AP 0, because cover is a thing in 10th edition. Let's say they have a 3-up armor save, that means that 1 of the regular damage goes through, and then 2 devastating wounds go through, and voila. You just spend 120 points to deal 3 damage on average. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's horrible, it's terrible, but at least it looks cool because it's like, you know, a baby tank. So like, oh, you look at my baby tank, there's a Custodes, wee! And that's why you bring a Palace Gravitack. That's it. You could argue that 12-inch movement is like good because you can go out and grab an objective early on. I'd argue that you can do that with Venatari for 80 points more, which, you know, it's a lot of points more. But then you actually also have a unit that can do other things. That's my opinion. Alright, so now I've explained each category and where they stand, so let's just take them in the order they appear from now on, and let's hopefully not make this a 2-hour video. So next up we have Alea. She goes into flawed choice. Alea gives you +1 to hit if you're under starting strength and +1 to wound if you're under half strength, if I'm not misremembering. She gives the Sister of Silence fight first, which is nice. And that's about it. Yeah, I looked up her weapon profile. She's okay. You know, devastating wounds, anti-psyker 4+, 4 attacks, hitting on 2, strength 6, AP 3, damage 3. She can do some damage. The issue is kind of like the unit she has to join. There is only one unit she likes to join, and that is the Vigilators. And the Vigilators would rather have a Knight Centura in them, I think, 8 out of 10 times. Because the Knight Centura gives +2 to advance and +2 to charge. And, you know, having fight first is nice if you're being charged, but, you know, it's Sister of Silence we're talking about. They die to Stormbolters. So what really matters is you getting that first charge off and then probably accepting their death afterwards. So generally, I think Alea goes into Flawed choice just because I would rather take a Knight Centura if I'm picking a leader for my Sister of Silence. And that just means that there's no reason to pick Alea, and therefore she goes into Flawed choice. Next up, Allarus Terminators. They go in the amazing tier. I love them, I always have loved them. They are my favorite units in the Custodes arsenal. Unfortunately, axes, which I think are cooler, are absolutely worse for whatever reason. Don't bring axes, it's dumb. Bring them with spears. I would also like to say that I don't think it's worth taking in 2 or 3 man squads. I think it's 5 or 6 man units all the way. But that's because the way I play Custodes is with big blobs. Or big blobs, you know, 5 man, 6 man units, that kind of thing. And that's the way I just generally play the game. There might be a game style that works using 2 or 3 man Allarus. I just don't personally see it. So for me, they are an amazing unit. Reroll wounds against basically everything, because if you're shooting at something with a character in it, you get rerolls. Shooting against a monster, rerolls. Shooting against the vehicles, rerolls. Or if you're meleeing against them, rerolls. You have the mobility and very scary fact that you can turn 1 deep strike with these guys, assuming your opponent goes first. And all in all, that just makes them a really, really strong unit. And that's why they go in the amazing tier. Next up, we have the Allarus Terminators' not so great cousins, the Aquillon Terminators. And you know what? I'm putting them in they look cool. They're not a flawed choice, because not only do you always take Allarus Terminators over these guys, the only redeeming factor that Aquillon have compared to the Allarus Terminators is that they can take a flamer. That's it. They can take a strength 6 flamer and AP 1, damage 1. Their power fist is strength 8 for some reason. I don't know why. Their lightning claws is just like a Misericordia with +2 attacks. I don't need that. Their ability is not reroll wound rolls, it's +1 to hit against the closest target. Or sorry, +1 to wound against the closest target, which is infinitely worse than rerolling. Oh, and fun fact, even their teleport is worse, because in their teleport it says they go into reserves, which means that you cannot use it turn 1, and they just, yeah, that's all I have to say. They are just worse in every single way. They're not a flawed choice, they are just, at least they look cool. Oh, and they used to be more expensive before the Dataslate, for whatever reason. Alright, next up, we have the gunship. I forget if this is the Ares or the Orion. I think this is the Ares and the bigger one is the Orion. I might be wrong about that. In any case, we can just quickly put both of those into... they look cool, flawed. No, they go into they look cool. I'm totally down for some people bringing these guys and being like, oh, I have like 14 last cannon melter shots, and it's amazing. It's not amazing. It's a gimmick. And yes, you might win some games because people are like, what the fuck is that? Is that a Custodes aircraft? I didn't even know they had one. But in general, though, if you're spending 500 or 700 points on one of these airplanes, I think we got some other issues. So they go in, they look cool category. Next up, we have the Shield Captain on Virtus Praetor. And I just did a video about these guys. I don't think any of you are surprised when I put them in flawed choice. The Shield Captain is actually good. He has some really good abilities. Issue being, he's 180 points. Another issue is that after the Dataslate, there's only one stratagem he can use for free on the bikes, outside of command reroll. Then comes the fact that bikes are also 80 points per model. So you're looking at a minimum of 340 points for 2 bikes and a captain, and that's very expensive. And that is why they go in flawed choice. They actually have some play, they can do some things that are very cool, they're just way too expensive for that cool thing they do. Alright, next up, Blade Champion. I might be getting some angry comments here, but I think he's a strong choice. I don't think he's amazing. The way I kind of see it is that the Blade Champion, when you bring the Blade Champion, you bring like 2. At the very least, because when you're doing that playstyle, you're playing, you know, zoom up the board, crush my enemy. But just bringing 1 Blade Champion, I don't think does it for your list. It can be nice to reroll advances and charges. And I mean, yeah, he can slap a little bit. But if I'm not playing that, I want to rush my opponent's face playstyle, I think I would try and find the 20 points for a Shield Captain instead. So I think I'm happy with putting him in strong. I think it's like on the verge, right? I think it's on the verge of being amazing. But for now, I just like to put him at the top of the strong tier list. Alright, next up, the Caladius Graph Tank. We're putting that in strong as well. I talked a bit about the Caladius Graph Tank before, and I've said it's a bit of a crutch for Custodes. It's a very big model, so it can help with screening. It has 48-inch range anti-tank shooting, so it can help take down the big things. It's 215 points, which is obviously pretty cheap for Custodes. But I also think that a good player will do better without these tanks and using more infantry. Whereas a more average player, me, most likely you, no offense, will do better using the tanks because, as I said, they work like a bit of a crutch. They sit back behind a wall, they screen out your deployment zone, they shoot out at the angles you can get, and they also force your opponent to play a bit, deploy a little bit more defensively because they cannot just put all their big things out in the open because you actually have something that can shoot at them. So I am very happy with putting the Caladius Graph Tank in the strong choice. Do not take the guns shown on this picture. These are the wrong guns. These are the terrible guns. You want to take the anti-tank guns, which is 4 shots, strength 12, AP 3, damage D6 plus 2, twin linked and lethal hits against monsters and vehicles. That's the only right choice. I don't even want to hear anyone say otherwise. It is a stupid argument if you're saying that the other guns are better. They're like strength 9, AP 1, damage 3. It's just, no. Just no. Don't do it. Alright, next up we have the Shield Captain. And I think I'm putting him in strong choice as well. The reason why he's not in the amazing tier is because we cannot bring a lot of characters in Custodes. They are very expensive, and our units are very expensive, and that ends up meaning that we cannot take as many characters as we might want to. And there's another Shield Captain I would rather have than this guy, and it's the Allarus Shield Captain. So for that reason alone, I think the Shield Captain ends up in strong choice rather than amazing. He's still really good. He can get a freak stratagem, double karate, triple karate once per game. Yeah, he's a strong choice. I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing him. I just don't think he's an amazing choice. The Coronus Graph Carrier. You might be surprised by this, but honestly, if the Land Raider is average, so is this guy. He does a little bit of mortal wounds. He's a little tough. He moves around. He protects your guys while he transports them. He gives them wound rerolls when they disembark, which granted is not super valuable for most things. But if the Land Raider is average, I also think the Coronus Graph Carrier is average. There's probably some fun builds out there where you put some Wardens in a Graph Carrier. You move out, you shoot something, you disembark, you shoot something. It does a little bit of damage. It's neat. But the issue is it's too expensive because it's a glorified transport. Yes, it has some devastating wounds, but I think the math turns out to be like, on average, you deal 4 or 5 damage, 2 of them being devastating wounds. So that's not why you bring him. No, I cannot. The Land Raider, I'm like, okay, that's average. This one is a flawed choice. It's a flawed choice. It's not an average choice. I was trying to speak myself or make myself think that it was an average choice. It's not. It's a flawed choice. So down into flawed choice it goes. The Contemptor Dreadnought, the good old normal one where you can either take an assault cannon or the melta and a fist. He also goes into flawed choice, and he's actually he's ahead of his brother. Let's do it like this. I think Coronus goes like this. So I think he is better than his brother, the Achilles, because he can actually come back to life on a 2+. That's pretty neat. But he suffers from the same issues. It's a 5-up invulnerable save, there's no minus damage, there's no feel no pains, he only moves 6 inches. I think there's a list where you take 3 of these and just yeet them up a flank, and then kind of, make your opponent take a bit of, a stat check, right? Because they're actually, they're pretty expensive. They're 200 and something points. They're 185 points, which is still pretty expensive, but 185 points times 3, that's 300, like 500 points. It's 500 something points that you can throw down one flank and be like, can you kill these guys before they arrive? Because then they can still do some damage, right? The Melta is okay, their melee is okay. They can do some damage, and when you kill them, they come back on a 2+ at the end of the phase, which is the important part. But even with that being said, it's a flawed choice. 500 points to try and stat check your opponent, not gonna go so well. The Galactus Contemptor Dreadnought is better than the Achilles, worse than the Contemptor, and has the same issues. He has a 4-up invulnerable save, which is ever so slightly better. However, his melee weapon is strength 9, which means that he wanna punch, light infantry. Or not light infantry, but infantry in general, and we don't need help killing infantry. Wardens, Allarus, guards, Venatari, all those things kill infantry just fine. Alright, next up we have Custodian Guard, and this is also one where I think my personal opinion is gonna affect the placing of these guys. I would place them at the top of strong choice. You cannot do the 10-man brick anymore. The rerolls are still very good, but I think for 25 points extra, there is another unit that does their job just as well while also being durable, which leans more into the playstyle that I'm thinking. We'll just go ahead and take them out right now. It's the Wardens. Wardens have the exact, so, every Custodian basically have the exact same melee profile. These guys get to reroll wound rolls. These guys get to be more durable. And I think what we need to win more games as Custodes right now is being durable and not being killy. These guys help being more killy, but we don't need that. I still think we kill a lot of things when we get into combat with it. And so I don't think the guards are needed. I think the Wardens are needed to make sure we stay alive wherever we go. Or at least stay as much alive as we can. Alright, the Rhino. This is for the Sisters of Silence. It goes into average. Rhinos are actually surprisingly good in this edition. Just not for Custodes because, if Custodes could use a Rhino. If the Rhino had like a 4-man Custodes capacity, I think we'd see a lot of Rhinos. But alas, they can only transport Sisters of Silence. And we're not really taking big squads of Sisters of Silence, which just means that the Rhino's a little bit eh. But yeah, the Rhino is fairly tough. You're not going to kill it with just normal infantry fire. It can do actions. It can move block. It's pretty fast. Yeah, the Rhino's actually pretty good. Just not in Custodes. And yeah, I talked myself into it again. It's a flawed choice. Because if you're taking a Rhino, that means you're taking a lot of Sisters of Silence. And if you're taking a lot of Sisters of Silence, I am not sold on your list. But I could be, I'm not entirely against it. Fuck, no, I'll take it in average. I'll take the Rhino in average because it actually has some play. Alright, speaking of Sisters of Silence, here we have Witchseekers? I'm actually not sure. I think these are Witchseekers, and I think I am going to take them and put them in average as well. I think I'm going to put them top of average, actually. When you take Witchseekers, you take them because you have, 10 points left over, and you were going to add a Prosecutor squad anyway. They don't really do anything better than the Prosecutor squad. I mean, Flamers are ever so slightly more useful. But you take them for 10 points more, so you can do a scout move, get an objective turn 1, or do a secondary turn 1, and then they die. That's what they do. Here we have the Knight Centura, and as I was talking about before, I just think if you are taking an HQ to lead your Sisters of Silence, I think the Knight Centura is better in every single way than Alea. That being said, I don't think she is an average choice. I think she's a flawed choice, because as I've been saying, I don't think you want to invest that much into Sisters of Silence. So I'll go ahead and place her. I'll place her in flawed choice. Where she is doesn't really matter too much. I think we'll do something like that. That's fine. Yeah. Knight Centura, flawed choice. Next up, the Allarus Shield Captain, also an amazing choice. Obviously, can only lead Allarus Terminators. I also think that he's not worth taking if you're not taking a 5 or 6 man Allarus squad. That being said, when you bring them, you get those 3 stratagems. You get potentially an enhancement. I think he's really good. Nope. He's a strong choice. He's not an amazing choice. I keep changing my mind. But I think this tells a good story about Custodes, how they are right now in the meta. We have a lot of okay choices, and we have a lot of bad choices. And then we have a few really good choices. And I think a lot of units just land there. I just think a lot of units are like, yeah, you can take them, but they're not going to be like super amazing units. Yeah, he's 140 points, which is the same cost as a normal shield captain, but he gets +1 wound, +1 toughness. You get to use a stratagem for free, so +1 to wound against monsters or vehicles, or -1 damage, or a free CP reroll. His fight on death ability is obviously kind of useless. That's not why you take him. You take him to get the enhancement and the 3 stratagem. That being said, I have actually been playing without a shield captain in my 5-man Allarus block, and it doesn't feel terrible. It doesn't feel great either. It feels good to have that -1 damage and or an enhancement, but I think I'm happy putting him in strong. Alright, next up, the Telmon dreadnought. He is going into flawed choice as well. He is big, he's supposed to be tanky, but he's not really that tanky. His shooting is his melee is and that's why he goes into flawed choice. He's a little bit too expensive. See, Telmon, 235 points. That is too expensive. If he goes to 200 points, I'm gonna be like, you know what? If you like playing with Telmons, bring it. But yeah, if you just look at his profile with his various guns here. The Arachnid Storm Cannon, devastating wounds, 12 shots, but no rerolls, so you're doing an average of like 1.5 devastating wounds every time you fire it. The Accelerator Culverin is 4 shots, it's strength 9, AP 1, damage 3. AP 1 basically means AP 0 in 10th edition. So if you're shooting at a vehicle, not only are you wounding on 5s, but they're saving on 2s or 3s. The Bolt Launcher is just, it's just there for extra shots. The Plasma Projector is only D3 shots. at strength 7, AP 2, damage 1. You know, a flamer with D3 shots might as well just not exist in my opinion. Flamers are like the quintessential, I'd rather have more shots. And then yeah, for some reason it's toughness 10 instead of toughness 11. It does have movement 8, which is a little bit better. But overall, I just don't think he's good. Only having 5 attacks in melee, it's only damage 3, like, it's just not worthwhile. AP 2, yeah, no. Telmon Dreadnought in Flawed choice, and I feel very safe with that decision. If you want to bring a Telmon, I think the best way to bring him is with a gun and a fist, because at least he can do something there. If you take double guns, you can do some devastating wounds. You're looking at 4 devastating wounds every time you shoot, which is 235 points. I'll rather just take a tank. Alright, this one doesn't matter because we don't have Vexillus characters anymore. Valerian also goes into strong choice. I think he is at the bottom of strong choice for characters. He's one of those characters you bring because you don't have enough points for the other ones. Or if you're, building your list to be able to take on melee list even better because he gives Armor of Contempt. So I think he's a strong choice. I don't think he's an amazing choice, but he's a good choice. Vexillus doesn't matter. Vigilators go straight into Flawed choice. We don't really need more melee power. So if you are bringing Sisters of Silence with swords, that's because you think they're cool and they're fun to play with. But we don't need them. I mean, every Custodian has 5 attacks, a strength 7, AP 2, damage 2 at the very least. So we don't need to get those 3 extra attacks. And yes, they have devastating wound, blah blah blah. No, not relevant. I don't think it's relevant. And then we have Prosecutors. These girls I want to put in strong choice because I think almost every single list I see have at least one unit of these girls, and they do their job amazingly, which is stand the fuck back and hold the home objective. And they do that great. For 40 points, that's amazing. Custodians cannot get anything cheaper than that. Just mwah, chef's kiss. Sagittarum. They are going into they look cool tier. I am very sad to put these guys in here. I don't have any redeeming things to say about these guys. They have to be taken in 5-man squads. You cannot do 4-man squads. They use a regular heavy bolter. Their -1 to hit ability only works against infantry. Well, not infantry, also works against, beast and swarm and all that, but it doesn't work against monsters and vehicles. And their once per game ability requires them to get wound rerolls for any kind of effects, and they can only get that by jumping out of a Coronus Graph carrier, and I'm not paying 200 points to deal 4 or 6 mortal wounds on average. Not mortal wounds, devastating wounds on average. I've really tried to be like, okay, no, but you can use them as home field objective holders, and you can do... No. There are no redeeming qualities about the Sagittarum in the current state. Spend those 225 points on literally anything else, and I think you'd be happy. And finally, we have the Agamatus Bikes, which, in a twist of fate, I actually think is better than normal Virtus Praetors, because their ability is they can move 6 inches after they shoot. So first of all, let's assume we are investing the crazy amount of points that the Shield Captain will be to add into them, right? So what you could do, in theory, turn 1 with these guys, is you could move them the 12 inches that they move, shoot with them, move them 6 inches behind a wall. Then in your opponent's turn, at the end of their fight phase, you use your captain's once per game ability to move them 12 inches. And that means you can move, in theory, 30 inches in a single battle round. That's pretty neat. It's still way too overcosted, the guns they're shooting are not good, and it's still a bad thing, but it's a cool trick. And I think because they can do that cool trick, I value them more than having the auto-advance 6 inches. Or is it the mortal wounds thing that the bikes do? I don't remember. But I think they're ever so slightly better just because they can move 6 inches after shooting. All their gun choices are still bad, but at least they can move 6 inches after shooting. And with that, we have completed the Custodes tier list. I don't think there's any units I'm forgetting. I've added the Sagittarum and I've added the Agamatus Spikes. I think that is all. If I missed a unit, please let me know in the comments below. But yeah, these are my thoughts. And hopefully I gave a good enough explanation of where I put things and why I put them there. And as I said earlier, I think this just goes to show where Custodes are right now. We have a lot of okay choices, right? Basically all of our characters are strong choices, with Trajan being an amazing choice, in my opinion. Basically all of our infantry, except for Sagittarum and Aquillon Terminators, are a strong or an amazing choice. And then there's just everything else. All our vehicles, except for the Caladius Grav Tank, the Land Raider and the Rhino, there's just not a reason to bring them. All of our mounted units, they're too expensive, there's just not a reason to bring them. The Sisters of Silence characters are, you guessed it, too expensive. There's not really a reason to bring them. But overall, I don't think Custodes are in as terrible a spot as people say when it comes to the data sheets. I think we have a lot of good data sheets, as is shown right here on the tier list. I think we're mostly talking a points issue. Maybe unit size issue. I don't think we should go back to being able to take 10 Custodian Guard, but I do think, just maybe, that it would be okay for Custodes to go down to 3-man squads, instead of 4-man as minimum. That's just a thought. I'm not entirely sure if that's correct, but that's just a thought. Alright, hey guys, if you like this video, like and subscribe, leave a comment below, I'd really appreciate it. The next video you will be seeing is probably me vlogging. Yes, I'm gonna try and vlog, even though I'm probably gonna do a terrible job. It's also gonna be recorded on my phone, so don't expect any amazing quality. About my time going to the Danish WTC qualifier, which is happening this weekend. So that's probably the next video you will be seeing from me. Sorry I haven't been uploading a lot, I just don't really have a lot to talk about. And if I don't have something to talk about, I don't make a video. It's pretty simple. Alright guys, take care of yourselves, and until I see you again, I hope you have a wonderful time.